Hey, I want to talk to you about Splinter Cell for a little while because it's time to talk about it. Let's be real. E3 just wrapped up and social media, like every year, but the most this year, is filled with people being like, Ubisoft, bring back Splinter Cell. We need Splinter Cell. And I think nobody's really taken a minute to stop and talk about why I love this series specifically, why so many people do. And there's a lot of reasons why it should come back. And maybe it shouldn't. Now, I know, because a lot of people commented, they're quick to comment it, they are making a VR Splinter Cell experience. I love VR, probably more than the average person. I've held on to it to the detriment of my wallet. That's still not what I want. I'm going to play it. It's probably maybe going to be cool. Ubisoft actually does a good job with VR stuff, but I'm talking traditional, real, regular old, straightforward Splinter Cell stealth game. Now, I think to kind of talk about why we need it again, we need to go back to the beginning. First, the original game was seemingly at first just like a graphical showcase, but it turned out to be a pretty awesome game. Not only was it one of like the best looking Xbox games by far at the time. I remember looking at pictures of it in a magazine and not even believing what I was seeing with the lighting and stuff. It also just turned out to be awesome. And it very quickly thrust itself into being like the other stealth game up there with what at the time, the most conversation was still Metal Gear Solid for the most part. This was a totally different breed. And it had such a good level of realism to it and precision and Tom Clancy-ness in a way that made it feel like the older Rainbow Six games, but in third person, and you're a ninja. It was just, Now, Splinter Cell right out of the gate felt immediately different and special and more precise because it embraced light, shadow, darkness, and sound in a way that other stealth games didn't really. They did on paper, but this did in terms of actually measuring the amount of sound you were putting out and the amount of darkness or light you were in with meters, which made it really cool. There are moments where these Splinter Cell games, the traditional ones, put you in pitch black darkness. Your darkness meter shows that you were in the dark, and you can have someone essentially walk right past you, but if it's in pitch black darkness, they won't see you. And the game did a really good job of selling that, whether it was just through the gameplay scenario, the way it played with those meters, the actual graphics, and the way it portrayed light and dark just made you feel like you really could disappear, and like Sam Fisher was so slick and so sneaky like no other. The first time I shot out a light bulb and turned an entire corner of a room into pitch black darkness, and a guy looked over in that dark corner and saw nothing, I was hooked. Now, the first game wasn't the best game ever or anything, but people were hooked for a reason. It just had some iconic elements to it. Sam Fisher, the way the game played, the way the game looked, the general tone, vibe, and atmosphere just worked. And it worked for the kind of quick out the door sequel, Pandora Tomorrow, which kept a lot of similar elements, added a couple of really interesting and crafty, more jungle outdoor type areas, but and a couple of extra moves, but really was more Splinter Cell. But they also added to that package the first iteration of the Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer, which, if you ask people that play it, they'll probably tell you, whether from Pandora Tomorrow or the ensuing versions, whatever version, it's one of the best multiplayer experiences ever. Actually, for me, it was the first thing. It was the reason I got Xbox Live. I had an Xbox. It was great. I used it to play Halo and stuff, but I didn't get and purchase Xbox Live and connect it to the internet until playing these Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer modes, which were just so well done. That mode, of course, continued over to Chaos Theory, which this mode was just so fun as a way of being hide and seek. One group of people played first person with a gun, with gadgets, as a mercenary hunting down the spy characters, which played a bit more traditionally like, Sam Fisher in third person, crouching around, typical single player gameplay. And it worked perfectly. I think specifically because there was nothing else out there like it at all, and it had good tenseness to it. It ebbed and flowed. There was little different versions of it. It came in and out over time, and they tried other types of multiplayer modes, like some pretty good cooperative stuff, like little cooperative story experiences to play through. But I was getting sidetracked. Chaos Theory was the pinnacle, I think, for the entire series. It really blew things out, and I think pretty much became the best reviewed and one of the best selling ones at the time, and really changed up the way it played just enough to really make it more accessible and more fun and more deep. It was a win-win. Sam Fisher controlled like butter. You had all these options with incapacitating people or murdering them with a knife. The graphics, like the original, were once again totally mind-blowing. Like right from the beginning, the first level is a rainy level at night, so it's just the game really flexing its shit on you. And by that point, and they would continue this forward, you really get a sense of the characters. Sam Fisher, the agency he works for, his handlers, the leadership, some interesting villain and plot stuff going on. Nothing, insane, but still pretty cool, pretty compelling in the moment. And that would continue over to Double Agent, where I will admit for a second with this one, it started to get a little silly, a little out there, where it's more of a convoluted plot where Sam Fisher needs to infiltrate a terrorist cell and he needs to go undercover and get arrested and befriend the bad guys in jail and then bust out of jail and like kind of work with them while also working with your agency, but also trying to decide who to go with when in order to fulfill the mission. And thankfully, for the most part, with some weird tweaks and experiences here and there, for the most part, it played still like a traditional Splinter Cell game. There were still moments in the game where you are crouching man, night vision goggles, maybe even ski mask, like the whole 9 yards, and it still really worked. They got really creative and kind of did a good spin on thing with putting you in outdoor daytime settings. Think kind of Metal Gear Solid 4, where you're crossing battlefields in the middle of the daytime, where there is conflict and violence going on, and you're just one person trying to kind of sneak your way through it. And it was really cool with how it played with light and shadow during the day, because number one, it was broad daylight, but it played where the sun was bright and where there were dark pockets, and depending on where people were standing, how they could see you, coupled with the fact that instead of Sam Fisher flipping his night vision goggles up and down, you were flipping your sunglasses on and off to kind of adjust to the light going in and out of buildings and stuff. It was weird, but cool. They tried something different. Now, fast forward to Splinter Cell Conviction, which is a complete change up for the series that actually had some different iterations. There was a first version where you were Sam Fisher on the run as like a hobo, like a homeless guy. You were like throwing garbage cans at people and trying to escape. It was weird. You were kind of undercover, but like on the run. Like it didn't happen. The new version of Splinter Cell Conviction, the one we actually got, is divisive for Splinter Cell fans, but as time goes on, I really, really have learned to appreciate it. Like Double Agent, some of the story stuff and some of the action can be a little dumb, a little goofy, a little on the nose, but it's still a really good badass simulator. What it does that's really interesting is that it kind of strips away some of the slow, precise shooting out light bulbs, using every single gadget at your disposal, slowly creeping and crouching. And it has still some elements of that, but what it does is kind of speeds things up. You are a Sam Fisher who's kind of like this like rebel, this outcast now, trying to do whatever he can to get answers for his dead daughter. So you're just a man with a backpack, a gun, who still has that original skill set. So you're fast, you can crouch, you can climb, you're still a ninja, but it's just a little less tactical, but still gives you the feeling and satisfaction of being slick, of being sneaky. It just played like a more accessible, more faster paced game, and I don't hate it. Yes, it's incredibly unrealistic how quickly he can climb, and he comes off like a monkey. I feel like part of that is just like that era of game, like that jank that kind of comes with things. But I still think the satisfaction you get from successfully pulling something off, especially in terms of this game, the way it escalated and heightened the tension really did a good job of stressing you out, where you're climbing and you're running and you stealth kill a dude and then you run and slide under something and then you climb up a pole and dudes are piling in. It always put you in really tense, really awkward situations that were tough to slip out of. But with the way the game was built and how fast it moved and how you were able to mark and execute targets, where it was like one of the earlier games where you would paint targets and then press a button and then you'd get a cool like pew, pew, pew sequence. That's my gun sound. That's my silent. That's my suppressed pistol sound. It's worth revisiting, especially because in terms of like some interactive stuff and just visual design, it was one of the first games to really play with some stuff. Like you'd have moments in the game where the mission objective would splay itself on a brick wall that you're walking by. Like really, really cool stuff that you had seen in movies, but not really in games like this. It was definitely a special game, and I kind of go back to that one more than any of them just because it's like a quick, fun, pick up and play, be badass type of game. Then years later, we have Blacklist, which modernized things even more, but did a good job of combining the way the old games played and the way Conviction played, which was faster and more accessible. Threw in some, character customization or gear customization type of stuff, some progression, more larger open-ended mission design stuff, which is a little all over the place. I'd say not as compelling as the original games, but I thought it was a really good step in the right direction. I'm talking gameplay-wise more than anything. And I think that's part of the reason why it hurts that we haven't seen another one, because it seems like Ubisoft was starting to figure out how to do a newer take on modern stealth. Now, I'm not saying that they should bring back Splinter Cell and make it play like Blacklist. I still very much would like the older games, but if this is the compromise, that's fine. The problem with Conviction was that it tried to give us a new Sam Fisher, new voice actor. He looked a little younger, and it just really didn't work for me. I think part of these games, as much as the story isn't like the number one aspect of them, the character you're playing as is. And Michael Ironside's portrayal of Sam Fisher is up there. It's incredibly iconic. It's like really up there with like the top tier of video game voice actors, characters tied to their voice actors. Obviously, David Hayter, Solid Snake. The list goes on, but I'm a hack and I just immediately think of Metal Gear, so that's the example I bring up. But that's where we left off. That's it. We got a pretty decent Splinter Cell game that seemed like it was Ubisoft trying new things, but still a single-player campaign with a story, a villain, things going down, just more modern, and it worked. Just maybe not with the Sam Fisher that we liked. And that's been it. And we've gotten Sam Fisher popping up in things, but never really being completely the real Sam, and never really in a way that I really want as someone who loves playing single-player narrative adventure games and stealth games. So Splinter Cell, I think, needs to come back because we don't get enough stealth games like this. I will credit the indie game industry and AA developers for putting out some good stuff. I mean, they're making another Origami, which is cool. There are stealth games like this, third-person stealth games that are trying things. But in terms of like the big, crazy experiences with cool stories, we just don't really have a lot of these. And I think they're sorely missing. I don't think it's something that really aged out. I don't think they got outdated or cringy or not fun. They just slowed down to a trickle. So you have that. I think, especially considering there's not a lot of games like this on the market now, a new one would kill it and introduce new people to Splinter Cell. I think that's a win-win, coupled with the fact that you could try again with Spies versus Mercs. I know like other companies, other developers, other types of modes have tried to replicate it, but they're the originals and they could come back and do it and have a really compelling and cool-ass multiplayer mode. Not to mention the fact that like half of the work is done for you because you have a compelling, iconic character. You see big AAA game studios have a really hard time still sometimes coming up with a new character that is memorable and cool and unforgettable. And they have one with Sam Fisher, voiced by Michael Ironside. Now they've dragged him back. He had moments where he popped up. He obviously he's a Rainbow Six Siege character, but he's kind of not like what he usually looks like. He popped up in mobile games. They're making a Splinter Cell Netflix show, which I am keeping my eye on. There is some potential there with some of the people involved. I don't know yet. Netflix adaptations seem to be pretty good for video games, sort of. So there's that. But they got Michael Ironside back to just voice a real Sam Fisher for Ghost Recon games, for Ghost Recon DLCs, where he looked kind of weird, but his delivery was there. There was a good, like a really touching, like almost heartwarming callback to almost like Sam Fisher bidding Solid Snake a farewell, you know, the Metal Gear games, which was great, and just kind of shows you even more what we could have. Now, I understand Michael Ironside. I followed his career a lot. He has struggled with health issues. He is getting older. I do understand that things change. Newer people need to be brought on. But what I'm looking for here, and part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, is just to get one good send-off of that character. That Michael Ironside, Sam Fisher that we got from Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, Chaos Theory, Double Agent, Conviction. I don't want to have that character have a send-off, and I don't want to have Michael Ironside's last performance be in Ghost Recon DLC. The DLC wasn't the worst. The representation of the character wasn't the worst. But his own game, or his own experience, that's what I would love to see. So you have that coupled with the fact that we just don't get enough stealth games anymore. We don't get enough kind of narrative-driven action games like that anymore, especially from Ubisoft that aren't open world. So I would really, really love to get one more. The big question, of course, that a lot of people ask me is, you know, can Ubisoft even do it anymore? Do you really think that it would live up to the hype? I think for a lot of people, I think Splinter Cell is getting dangerously close to that territory where people are starting to hype it up and want it, where they don't even know what they want or never really played them that much. You know, for me, like, I lived these games, so I've been banging this drum for a while. So I do think just a regular old new Splinter Cell game would live up to my expectations. I don't know about every gamer out there, but I would love to see it. The real question is, Ubisoft, will they be able to pull it off, or will they just try and apply their formula that they do with other games onto this one? And will that be worth it? I don't know, but that's why I wanted to come here and kind of put pen to paper, words to video, about why Splinter Cell needs to come back one more time. Hopefully you get where I'm coming from and where maybe a lot of people are coming from that you maybe see on social media that are like, we need one more Splinter Cell game, damn it. Now you know. So really, thank you if you've stuck around this whole time. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you hearing me ramble about this. I really appreciate you sticking around and checking this out. My only ask is if you click the like button. You know, I'm just trying to talk about what I like here. I think YouTube needs more of that, more passion about this stuff. And maybe if you like it, send it to Ubisoft. I don't know. Maybe now they'll make a new one. They probably are. Who knows? I've heard it all. But whether you share it or not, or click anything, I want to hear from you guys what you think about the Splinter Cell series. Take a trip down memory lane with me. What was your first one? Were you lucky enough, like me, to experience the first one? Or did you jump in later on? Or maybe you've never played one at all. I definitely want to hear your perspective here. Like I said, though, if you appreciate this video, clicking the like button helps. I appreciate that. And, you know, consider subscribing if you want. I only put out a video once or twice a week, so I'm not going to spam you. But thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. I'm Jake Baldino. You can subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.